That's recording over there. Excellent. Okay, and I need to make sure we're not rolling the show twice when that sparks up as well. And then I'll start recording over here. Okay, nearly there with you, Sophie. So recording over. Great. Okay, let me get recording over on Zoom as well to the cloud. Hello, good evening and welcome to this Portugal Calling webinar, your guide to the International School Curricula with Sophie Roberts of the Crimson Global Academy. What an amazing name for your school, Sophie. Good evening to you. How are you and where are you talking to us from this evening?
Good evening. Thank you guys for having me. So as Astrid said, I'm normally based in the UAE. I've actually been escaping the heat a little bit. I'm currently in the UK. But yeah, as you mentioned, I'm joining from Crimson Global Academy. So yeah, really excited to talk to you guys tonight about some of the curriculums and about some of the options for school.
I love the name, the Crimson Global Academy. Truly global. I think when we were talking earlier, you said you have students in 40 countries around the world. That's quite an achievement. How did it all begin and how did you get into it?
Well, I'll start with how it all began prior to me joining. So our parent company originally was a university admissions consultancy, and our founder is an exceptional human being who essentially self-studied for his A-levels whilst being raised in New Zealand. He did 10 A-levels, which for anyone who's familiar with the UK system is a ridiculous amount of A-levels to complete. And he went on to study at Harvard, his master's at Yale, and his, I think his PhD at Cambridge. But essentially, he wanted to start a school that maybe approached learning a little bit differently. And essentially, I think it was aimed at kids like him who were maybe quite gifted, who were looking to study international curriculums and maybe didn't have that much access to them in their country. And I guess it kind of grew from there. He had a different idea of how education should work. We kind of value the idea of kids not necessarily being held back by age or what their local curriculums are, and really opening up different opportunities. So that's how the school began, and it was launched around 3 years ago. I guess I joined fairly early in that. I joined around 2.5 years ago, and I actually came on to launch the marketing for the Middle East, and then now I do the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. And so I've kind of launched those markets, been as part of that, done a lot of research and then information sessions. And so, yeah, I've been with the company about 2.5 years and seen the school grow from essentially catering to students in New Zealand and Australia to, like you mentioned, now 40 countries and over 1,200 students. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey so far.
Amazing, Sophie. And what an incredible founder you have. So this person was essentially home educated and educated themselves, and then went to some of the finest educational institutions around the world and wanted to create something new. And that's what we face now. That's what's available to people now, the result of their insight and their gift, I guess, academically to the world, and a different way of learning.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of did a hybrid model because he went to a really great school, but there's a limit to what you can do in a traditional school system. So his idea was basically, how do we facilitate that? So actually, as a school, we kind of have that model as well. You can be a full-time student, you can be a single subject student. So it's the idea that there shouldn't be necessarily limits to how we learn. And yeah, so his idea kind of started it. And there's no shortage of, online schooling options nowadays, especially. But I'm pretty excited to work for this one.
Yeah, and of course that all changed very much, didn't it, in the pandemic years when everybody became a homeschooler or an online learner, it seemed, during that time. And so I'm inviting everybody in the chat here, both on Zoom and over on YouTube, to ask any questions you might have. And then here on Zoom, of course, anybody who has a more personal question can ask that after we've turned the microphones off and finished with the recording. If you've got a more personal question that you would rather not be published on the internet. But let's find out how it fits in, how the Crimson Global Academy offer fits into the Portuguese situation. Traditionally, people coming to Portugal, of course, have their children maybe go to the public school system here. And I know wherever you are in the world, public school means different things, doesn't it? But the state school system, if you like, here in Portugal is one option. And traditionally, for a lot of expats, foreigners, immigrants, the international school is a choice as well. This is a new way of doing things. This is a new offering in that range. Tell us how it would work.
I mean, as you said, there's quite a lot of international schools already, operational within Portugal. So one thing we really kind of touch on, and I also always say, like, it's not my job to convince someone that online school's for them. It's our job to educate people on options and they find the right option. I think with education, you shouldn't be trying to convince someone of the wrong option. It's too important for that. So all you can do is really showcase what the options are. Now, the Portuguese system, from what I understand, is actually a very strong curriculum. So where we kind of look at why you might look at the Portuguese system versus international curriculum is the way we kind of approach different curriculums. Even as a school, we offer the UK and the US. Now, within Europe, also the IB is obviously incredibly popular, and these are kind of very well-known international curriculum. And then many countries within Europe, including Portugal, also have very strong state-schooled curriculum, as you mentioned. So where we usually talk about looking at what's right for your child would be in terms of looking at what the differences are, what the similarities are, your child's particular strengths, how your child handles different types of assessment, and the different types of interests they have, because there's quite big differences between the curriculum. Say like the British curriculum, for example, tends to be, so actually I'll talk about, when you look at all of these curriculums, right, the differences tend to be in a few key areas. Mm-hmm. The breadth and depth of subjects, the exam styles, and I guess content, which kinds of subjects you might study within different curriculums. The UK system, for example, is very academic focused. You study maybe less subjects, but you go really in depth, and it's aimed at the what you want to study at university as you get into those final years. Something like the US diploma or the IB, you're going to study far more subjects at slightly less in depth. And then with those three, again, the exam styles are very different. For the US diploma, maybe you'd pick that for a child. Like if we have a family come to us and they say, look, I've got a smart child, but they're terrible at exams. The pressure, something happens, they don't do well. Maybe the US diploma is a good option for that, because aside from the advanced placement, which are kind of these accelerated courses that are college level, the US diploma is internally moderated. Whereas say for a kid that, say that same child in something like the British curriculum, or like the IB, where it's the end of 2 years and then they do this big exam which counts for a huge percent of that mark. If they have a trouble with exams, that's not ideal for them. So these are the kind of things you look at when saying, like, okay, my child's really smart, but say in the IB, for example, if your kid is really great in key areas, but they are really struggling in certain areas, and that's going to drag their whole grade down, maybe the British system is good for them in that case. So there's so many different things to consider. Sure. And then things like the US diploma has some really great kind of like career-based modules, which are maybe lacking in the British curriculum. So yeah, these are some of the things that you kind of look for and how to pick the right one.
This is amazing. What I'm hearing is that you are as much a consultancy, an educational consultancy, and then a switchboard, if you like. So you patch the and it's very student-centered. And I think this, there'll be people thinking tonight, I wish I'd had this education that Sophie's talking about tonight, because it is very much student-centered, person-centered, isn't it? Rather than industrialized, one size fits all. And so the parents, and presumably the student as well, of a certain age, might have a conversation with you about their needs and abilities. And then you'll be patched in a switchboard type style to the curriculum that works best. And you can connect them to any of these, can you?
So we currently offer the US and the UK.
Right.
We don't currently offer IB. That said, I always believe that our team should tell someone if IB would be right for them. And like you said, like for us, I just think we have too much of a responsibility we have to give people the right advice. And it has to be like, we actually had a call today. My team had a call with someone that is interested in the school, but they're also speaking to one of our main competitors. And our main competitor has said yes to what this particular family wanted to do. And I told my team that we had to say no. And they were like, but they'll just go to our competitor. And I'm like, that's fine. But we have a responsibility to tell them why we're saying no. And that's because if you let their child do what they're asking, their child's going to fail the exams. And that's not fair on the student. And that other school might say yes, that's fine. But we have to give the right advice on what we think is right. And so at the moment, yeah, we offer the UK and the US curriculum. Potentially in the future, we'll offer the IB. The reason we currently don't is actually because the IB online is quite a new offering, whereas Pearson and Excel Online, the US and the UK curriculums are quite, the IB was more in like the beta testing phase of going online. I think it's something that we would definitely be interested. We like being able to offer, like we said, all the options we can. We don't like to limit ourselves. And that said, it's not for any reason of the IB not being fantastic curriculum. It is, like you said, any of these curriculums are really rigorous and well respected. It is just currently these are the two. We started with just British. Now we have British and American. So the potential to offer IB in the future, I guess, is always there. But currently we offer US and UK. And sometimes people mix, do the UK system and then take some advanced placement as well. So not always just one curriculum.
I love the sound of your ethics and doing the right thing and putting the student at the heart of this. That's fantastic. What ages are we talking about with this, and who can use your school? Academy.
Yes, so it's a school. We've
right.
got the name of Crimson Global Academy. I mean, it is a school. And actually, it's so funny that you talked about terminology before, because that differs well. Public schools, state schools, private schools, academies, they all mean different things in different places. So we currently offer from around ages, I say around ages 11 to 18. Now, what I say around is, like I said, because we don't necessarily believe in fitting kids in by just their age. It's also about what we've had 10-year-olds come and say, I want to do a GCSE, and we give them the placement exam and they score an A on the placement test for a GCSE level, which is what a 16-year-old's doing. So and it's not.
And you give them a job at the end of it as well. I mean, you're looking at some of the best talent in the world, aren't you?
I will say that working in this role has absolutely astounded me at some of the younger generations. And I genuinely think we meet some kids and I'm like, you're going to be like the head of state for your country. Like these kids.
Amazing. How exciting and inspiring. Incredible. Sorry, I interrupted you there though. So we're talking about ages and the fit. So it's not, yes, you are catering for people between 11, 18-ish, but then it'll be what's best suited to their needs rather than their age. But that's the sort of age group you'll be looking at as client families.
Yeah, we've started offering a CGA primary offer, but really only from the ages kind of around 9 up. The problem we've kind of, and I'm sure this is something they'll look, because I know the schools do offer from a younger age. Obviously, one of the considerations we have, and also a big consideration when we do allow different ages, right, is maturity levels for a classroom. Yeah. How well that child can stay engaged in an online environment, manage their time, attend lessons on time, etc. Like actually that 10-year-old in question that aced the exam, it was going to be difficult for him to sit in a classroom. He could perhaps take one of our one-on-one classes, but because he was so young and he was a great kid, I met him in person actually, but he was very young and was quite disruptive because he just didn't have the maturity necessarily to sit in that classroom with a group. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, currently the youngest is around 9. We started with 13 to 18. And that's kind of crept down as we've increased the offering. As I said, we keep adding more options, but currently more of a middle to high school.
I can understand why you would. It just sounds like such an exciting endeavor that you're involved with there. So if you could talk us through from the point of view of, let's say, a case study, not of a real person, but let's say somebody of around 11 years of age comes along. What's their their school day going to look like? You talk about the classroom. If it's, this, we're talking about remote learning, aren't we? Talking about what used to be called distance learning, if you like, and that's changed massively because of, the use of not only how we can learn across the internet and the web, but how the pandemic years changed things as well, I think, with both at work and in this educational environment. What would a school day look like? I mean, if some of us had to walk 12 miles to school uphill both ways in the snow back in our time, it sounds like it's very different for your students.
Well, I mean, definitely very different. First of all, no commute to school. I will say, I mean, I'm not sure there's such thing as a typical school day at CGA, because essentially, like we said, it depends on the student. We have, because we cater across different time zones, essentially, it's very flexible. I'll also quickly say we do have we have group classes. Those group classes are the standard kind of classroom setup, maximum of about 15 in a class, average about 7 to 8. You can also do one-on-one classes if you really need a certain amount of flexibility. And actually this September, we're also launching our flex option, which is a cross between kind of asynchronous with still having touch point with the teachers. But I'll go for the classroom setup, because I think that's the easiest. That's the, if we talk about a typical school, where it might look a bit different is you probably have less hours in the day actually spent, because, we do still actually have online form rooms and things like that, but there's no wasted time going between classes. You have your class times. They're quite dynamic. They're quite fast-paced lessons, because like I said, when you have 7 students in a class or maximum of 14, the idea is we kind of have this flipped model. So it's, students come to class ready to discuss, to work on things. It's not lectures by a teacher, because we just think you've got to keep things as engaging as possible online. It has to be very collaborative. But essentially they'll maybe have four hours a day in class, 5 hours maybe, if that. So they'll have 4 classes in their chosen subjects. It leaves a lot of time for extracurriculars. We have a whole bunch of extracurriculars as well. But essentially, when you say what does that look like, now that's where it depends on the student, because we work out the timetable with the family. We kind of say, what is it that you're working around? For our athletes, that will be, well, my training is this time to this time. I need to go to school in the mornings and be done by this, or I need to train in the mornings and go to school at night. Because we do have the benefit of being global, we can essentially match them to a class that works for them. So for those athlete kids, it could be that they get up and they go to train for 4 hours, 5 hours, and then they come online and they take classes in the afternoon in more of a block. Now, that said, they still have homework like a normal school. So obviously there's still going to be homework. There's still going to be those form times and stuff, but it's just, there's no downtime, I guess, that you would see in a typical school.
That's amazing, isn't it? And you mentioned athletes there. So this what we're talking about, this system, I've got a few questions, and one of them is about more about the format, and is there a back office and all that sort of thing, and how does it work technologically? But you mentioned, I want to pick up on the idea of athletes. We're talking about how useful here, I guess, it is for students who have special needs, and different lives. The needs of a child in the performing arts or who is an athlete would be very different to a regular school kid. And so you work around and with that as well, do you?
Yeah, so it's, we have so many different, I kind of guess, types of kids that want to come. Because actually, I think it was when me and Jackie had this conversation, she was like, who goes to an online school? That's a question we get asked all the time. Like, whenever I tell people what my job is, I was like, who goes to an online school? And so it's so many different types of kids. We have, like we said, the kids that kind of came to us because they feel like they're held back. They're these gifted kids that can't accelerate. They want that challenge. We have the athletes who are just, trying to balance a traditional school and a very kind of high level sports training whilst you're in school is a lot. I mean, when we speak to these kids and they tell us about their schedules, I'm like, ooh, that's a lot. We have kids who maybe it's the family setup. Maybe they have parents that live in different countries. Maybe we have a family, actually, I think they're in Australia. They're about to go traveling around the world with their 3 kids. And they're just going to sail.
Nomad schooling.
What a great life. They're just going to sail around the world for a few years and go to school online. So we essentially just work with the families to find. So that first call we have is always kind of like, who are you? What are your goals? What's your situation? And we essentially have to build a program for every single student that comes on an individual basis. Different, we help guide on curriculums, subjects, timetables. And again, it just comes back to really figuring out what that family is looking for and how we can help them. And again, always giving them our best advice and acting kind of in that like academic advisory role.
The consultancy that I mentioned earlier on, as educational or academic consultants, incredible. And the idea, yes, of nomadic families where the parents might still need to work, their children could log on at the same sort of time and do their schoolwork. Incredible. And then, of course, school, as we've discovered from the past, the history of school, it's not for everybody, is it? And, there is bullying. There are people who don't fit in at school who find that system difficult. And as you mentioned, when it's all about exams, that can be a particular kind of pressure for an individual who's bright, but just can't apply themselves very well in that exam situation and that sort of anxiety. It sounds like a perfect match for them as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a big portion of students that have, originally the reason they're looking is, for whatever reason, their child has maybe not had an easy time of it in school. That can be things. So I'd say you get a variety of reasons. Bullying is, there's unfortunately one where we've had situations where, we have a parent that comes to us and says, my child has just point blank refused to go to school anymore. They've had, we don't know what to do. We're at our wits' end. We really just don't know what to do next. You have kids that have maybe had medical issues where they've missed a whole bunch of school, bad experiences in their actual school that they normally go to, their traditional school. So I think what's nice about an online environment is maybe...
Oh, sorry, Sloan, if you could mute, that would be great. Okay, back to you, Sophie. Carry on.
So for those kids, I think being online gives that extra level of, I feel like they feel protection, but also because of the nature of our school. It's one of our kids said to me, it's funny because when I met her, I felt like she was a really confident student, but she had said to me, no, I was really shy in my old school. And she never said she was bullied, but when she graduated from CGA, she said I did an interview with her about the school just to, have a student kind of testimonial. And she said to me, bullying doesn't exist at CGA because everybody wants to be there and everybody likes learning. So you're not bullied for being a geek. You're not bullied for having your hand up or sitting at the front of the class. Everyone joins in. And she was like, I felt like it built my confidence back up. And then, it was nice because she got amazing grades as well. And she said, but I wasn't in my old school because I was so stressed all the time because of what I was going through that I couldn't concentrate. So I do think it's nice that it's maybe opened up another avenue. I mean, obviously, I still think it's sad that maybe it comes to that, but I think it's nice that there are options that it does open for students that have had a bad experience.
Well, that'd be an amazing strapline, wouldn't it? The school your children want to go to, as in that's a young lady's case there. That's lovely to hear. Before we bring it back round and apply it specifically to Portugal, can I ask you about the technology and the back? I mean, what happens? You log in, do you, to a system? Is that what CGA looks like behind the scenes?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of the tech setup, I wish I kind of had I could log in and show you. You log into the CGA hub, essentially. You log in online and it tells you as if you're looking at it as a student. So we have a parent portal as well, and they can log in and that tells you something different. But as a student, you log in and you have all your classes, all of your recordings from your past classes. Now, you do have to attend the classes. It's just that there are recordings on there as well. So you log in, it'll tell you, we have school houses. So it'll have your school house. We have a whole system where they compete and win badges. So it'll tell you your thing in there. All of your classes are on there. You also use Slack. So you can, all of our students are connected. We're currently, we build things out all the time. So the classroom itself originally was just on Zoom. Then we built a custom version and we're able to track things like, is our teacher doing the majority of the talking or are the students doing the majority talking? If a student's kind of stopped engaging, if they're kind of, how are they feeling? We ask the students how they felt about lessons, how they felt about things. We try and make sure that everyone is happy. We really see it as like a collaboration, right, between the parents, the students, and the school. We have to, especially with it being online, there's we want to give parents the reassurance that they are involved in this process. They know what's going on, because that is a bit different when you can't necessarily just walk into a school. We still have parents' evenings and stuff, but as a student, they log in, everything's there, the assignments that are coming up, the lessons, how they get in touch with us if there's an issue. But the main kind of thing will be, pretty much a similar setup to this. You have a classroom environment where everyone's on the call. There'll be tools brought up where they'll be working on the same problem in, maybe in like OneNote or on a document. And then, essentially we use, things like Slack. We have a lot of, if we have enough students in one area, we'll do meetups. We also do online meetups. We try and build that sense of community. And then for parents as well, they have a parent portal which keeps them updated on every assignment. They can contact the teacher straight away. Everything's highlighted in there, any events coming up. But it's you log in, everything's there, everything comes up. And you can see where your friends are as well.
That's great. Yeah, and see if you're in Gryffindor or not. I mean, truly, the people say, don't they, it wasn't like that in my day. I mean, this is absolutely right. This is so progressive and leading edge, isn't it? I think in terms of how education can be delivered. Let's bring it to Portugal then. Good evening to S in Los Angeles tonight. Good evening to Gina in upstate New York as well, moving to Portugal. And a question from Bonnie. Do the Portugal authorities accept CGA, Crimson Global Academy, as a real school, in inverted commas? No disrespect intended there. I ask, as I've heard of homeschooling parents running into problems with online schools not being accepted as a viable option. Thanks. It's a great question, isn't it? Because this isn't really homeschooling, is it? This is a school, but it's online.
So this is a really good question, because also it is worth noting that different countries have such vastly different legislation when it comes to homeschooling, online school. So as I said, I work across MENA, Europe, Africa. For Europe, for example, like Portugal, we have no problem. Because we are delivering accredited curriculums, the Pearson EdXL curriculum, it's not that we are giving you necessarily the qualifications. Your qualifications are coming from Pearson EdXL, which is the qualified exam board. In some countries, I know they require a leaving certificate or kind of confirmation that you've studied for a certain amount of years, in which case we provide that. The US diploma is delivered by so the British curriculum is delivered by the British exam board. So that's absolutely accepted. The US diploma is we are actually a registered US high school in the US. We're currently in the process of getting our WAC accreditation. We are NCAA accredited. So the US diploma is fully accredited by our school as well. So we haven't faced any issues in Portugal. We have quite a few families in Portugal. We have a family with 3 kids with us in Portugal. I actually really wanted to reach out and see if I could come and meet them when I was there, but it didn't work out. Certain other countries, there's more issues. I think sometimes where the issues come in with homeschooling, depending on your country, can be with if you're maybe not following certain curriculums and stuff. But for Portugal, I don't know how it relates to the homeschooling. You probably know better than me on that one. But with our school, because the qualifications are delivered by the British Exam Board or by a US accredited school, or the APs are by College Board, it's not a problem we've had. And you sit the exams in a test center locally. So for example, if you take the British curriculum, you'll be sitting them in a British school, the exams in a British school in Portugal. Because we're an online school, we can deliver the teaching. You have to sit the exams in person for the British curriculum. For US diploma, it can be internal, like I mentioned, or the AP test centers would have to again be a test center locally. So they're properly accredited. So we haven't faced issues with that. In other countries, it's not the same, but for Portugal, good to know.
Yeah, good to know. And certainly that's what we're about, is how it would work in Portugal. And I think the main concern, of course, understandably for any government, state, if you like, is the well-being of the child in any situation, and they don't always know, do they, in a homeschooling situation. And with the credentials you're presenting, I'm sure there's absolutely no problem there with CGA. That's great, Sophie. One sort of final question, kind of big picture question. Some people's criticism, I guess, of education is that it's educating students for a world that doesn't exist anymore. You know, the worst, if you like, the worst kind of education, the industrialized systems, habits of education are not necessarily educating people for the 10, 20 and 30 years to come in the future. And we hear, don't we? I mean, I heard a statistic that, over 1 billion jobs will be lost worldwide because of AI. And I know this is a slightly odd question, but I'm sure CGA have got a response to this, with the vision you've got as a company and as an educational institution. How are you looking forward, and how are you preparing students for tomorrow rather than a repetition of yesterday?
I mean, I think so that there's several elements to that, right? I mean, as much as we talk about innovation in education, we're also very results focused. We help kids get into some really great universities. Yes. There is any of these universities necessarily, you are limited with curriculum. So I'd say there's other schools out there that are far more innovative in terms of they've created whole new curriculums. Yeah. However, if you're still interested in your child going off to a university, they look for certain curriculums because that's how they understand what that education system means. That is the nature of it. However, there are obviously different ways that you cultivate the skill set for a future that is very different from today. The way that you cultivate the mindset for the future of work, the future, the reality is education is changing, but it's never going to change at the same pace as the world of work, because it's so hard to create new curriculums, to moderate curriculums for people to understand what they mean. So the way that we kind of approach this, I guess, would be our teachers are usually fairly at the forefront of what, we pick teachers that are very experienced, but also very focused on how things are changing. They are really, really involved in these conversations. They pick great topics to bring in. We give a lot of careers guidance where we do careers talks about how things are changing. We push, students learning skills in coding, in tech, in learning about, AI. We try and really figure out ourselves how we can provide value to the students. But I think also cultivating in our students the mindset that they are actually able to acquire any of the skills that they need. They are able to learn new things. We kind of create this idea that, you are at the center of your learning journey, and your learning journey never really ends. We try and, instill this love of learning. And I think that's the key to really any kind of career future. For all of us, our jobs will change. I'm, in marketing, my job, I've been in marketing for 12 years. It's changed a lot in that time, but obviously the world of work and AI and the impact will change. You have to change, you kind of work with students. They actually, a lot of time, will tell us what they think the change is going to be. These kids probably know better than us how technology is changing. And sometimes I think it's more about giving them the skill set to be resilient, the skill set to adapt, to find new ways of doing things. We're still confined within the curriculums that we teach. We can change them to a certain extent. We can bring extracurricular clubs. We can add these talks that help them, figure out how AI might impact medicine, how AI might impact law, how different things will change. But ultimately, I think it's about cultivating that mindset of that idea of being able to adapt to a new situation. So I think if you want to still work within the confines of an education system that we are in, there's still ways to do that in a way that can be future focused and a way that kind of allows students to imagine the possibilities of that.
Great answer. Best of both worlds then, really. If the parents' aspiration is to have the children go through a particular route that's tried and trusted, you can do that. And then there's all this extra, the philosophy of education that you're introducing to the child, that it's a lifelong experience, and they are at the center of the learning experience themselves. That's fantastic. Sophie Roberts, thank you very much, from Crimson Global